I don't feel good about it, but yeah.
It's never stopped us.
Exactly.
The old Pod Therapy motto.
Yeah. From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. We are sad to report that the Twitter purge has finally affected Pod Therapy. We only have 425 followers, and that just doesn't sound right. I can't prove it, but I feel like we had 2 million followers a few days ago. This is all Twitter's fault. Damn you, Twitter. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
That bastard Jack has been after us forever, man. You know, I mean, I don't look at the numbers, but I'm sure they should be in the millions. And so that startles me that the numbers are so low.
Yeah,
Clearly.
When I checked that this morning and I saw 425, I was like, no.
We're being
That's
deplatformed.
just not right.
Yeah, it's even worse on Facebook and Instagram. There's just nobody there. Yeah. And come to think of it, I'm pretty sure the Patreon used to have a few million subs too.
Right. Yeah, of course. But fine. They're not going to silence us.
That's right.
We will continue to plug on and keep going.
You know, the only thing that will silence us is that mute button, folks. You just use that. You don't need to. Most folks have found their way to that button. You will too.
Yeah, believe it or not, silencing us has not been a problem for most people.
Yeah.
Not even a lack of interest will slow this show down.
Nope. Yeah. Okay, so this is funny because I was actually this is something that who was it?
Vin
Don
Diesel.
Henley from the Eagles, right? He was being interviewed once, and he's talking about bands breaking up, and he said the thing they said about it is it's inevitable at some point. You do it until you don't want to do it anymore, you can't do it anymore, or no one gives a shit whether or not you're doing it anymore.
Right.
And I thought, not true, Don Henley, because this podcast has stayed in operation despite all three of those things. We are still doing it.
We'll show you.
But an old acquaintance of mine was a legit Broadway star. Was in a major show for well over a decade, doing the lead role in I don't know why I'm being cagey about this. She was in Phantom of the Opera. She was Christine in Phantom of the Opera. She was the female lead in Phantom of the Opera for years and years. Wow. And she said, one day I realized I was going through my grocery list in my head while I was on stage, and I knew that meant it was time for me to go. I was like, yeah, that is a level of privilege that most people will never experience. The idea of I will leave this job that pays ridiculous amounts of money doing a few hours of work a night. Now, I'm not denigrating the amount of work that goes into being a performer. I mean, I know that very well. But I'm like, most people will never have the option of leaving a job because they're bored with it.
Yes.
Right.
That's so true.
You're saying the only reason you left this incredible job that most performers, most people in your industry will never have the opportunity to even have, much less leave willingly. Yeah. And you're just like, I'm kind of bored with it. We'll do something else.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so crazy.
And this is a woman who the first time she auditioned for a Broadway show, she got the lead role in a major Broadway production.
God.
Phantom wasn't her first show, but it was her very first show out the gate was a lead role in a huge show.
So did she leave that to go on to do something just as amazing?
No.
Okay.
No, she never did. She never did anything quite as big as that again. But I mean, she does now. She does stuff that she wants to do.
Yeah.
Now she's in that camp.
It always annoys me when I see people who are so talented that they're the best at what they do, and then they quit for the same reason they get bored.
Right.
And they're like, I'm going to try this other thing, and then they excel at that too.
Right. Oh no, she still does. She still performs.
Yeah.
She still does shows. She just hasn't done as big a show as Phantom of the Opera since.
Well,
then.
good on her for being able to just identify that she's bored with it and wants to do something different, and is able to do that,
and then just can.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Reminds me of Bo Jackson. where it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to try this sport now, and I'm the best.
Yeah, I'm awesome.
Yeah. Oh look, I'm awesome again.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, did I break your sport that you spent all your life training to do, and I don't even know the rules of yet? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, those people are who I'm talking about.
Yeah. So she's the Bo Jackson of Broadway, I think was the takeaway that I got.
That's
from
it.
that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what he was saying.
Well, I'm sure she has more followers than the Pod Therapy Twitter account because she hasn't been targeted by the radical big media companies for our political views, Nick, because they just can't stand how hot topic we are with our political stuff, which if you want to hear all about our deep political views, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and you can hear Jim say things that you can write hate mail about because that happened in this episode.
It's worth $1 if you enjoy writing hate mail. It's worth $1 to go listen to it, and then there's plenty of fodder. Yeah, you'll there's something to write about.
Just a stack of dry straw. Just light a match and throw it in.
I don't see her on Twitter.
Oh,
there you go.
So maybe she does have fewer followers than you.
Yeah.
Or she's been silenced too.
Or maybe she's also been silenced.
So political
speaking
silence.
Of politics.
There it is.
There we go. There's our segue. Smooth.
I was trying to softball this thing to you for a couple of minutes there.
Yeah, no, I don't swing. I just watch the pitches go by. So, Jim, do you follow Dr. Mealy on any social media or on his mailing list?
Mealy? Yeah, we're on a first name basis. I just call him John.
Oh, okay.
So, not a...
Okay, well, he's probably going to be upset because his name is David.
Yeah,
But-
he's never like that.
That's why he doesn't respond.
That's
Okay,
why he doesn't
so
respond.
Dr. David Mealy is he is a psychiatrist. He is the chief editor of the ASAM criteria, and ASAM stands for the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Okay, so and for those of you unaware, ASAM is kind of the gold standard. It's the Bible essentially of addictions treatment. It's what we use. So everything is based around this. So anyway,
It's
he's
infallible.
a very good speaker.
It's inspired. It was hand delivered by God. The ASAM criteria. That's what we're trying to say. It also predicts the end of all things. That's very exciting.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. The Revelations chapter in ASAM is just
Riveting.
It's an acid trip. It really is. But so I'm on his mailing list. So he sends out these monthly or quarterly emails, and it's usually tips and topics about useful things in addictions treatment. Well, one of the things that he sent out, this actually goes back to November, but it always kind of stuck in my mind, and I think it's particularly relevant now, is it's actually some tips and tricks for having communication, resolving conflict, dealing with politics. So many of us know or have relatives that have conflicting political beliefs, and sometimes it can be very difficult to actually have a conversation with some folks.
Yeah. A lot of families relate. Maybe you voted for Biden. Maybe your brother-in-law stormed the Capitol and tried to assassinate members of Congress. Tomato, tomato. There's a lot of strife. We should probably figure out how to talk to each other.
And you know what? Actually, this seemed more relevant in November than it does now. I'll talk more about that later. But there's some conversations you just don't want to have at all, that maybe it's best not to have, as opposed to having some tips and tricks of how to have a conversation. But anyway, one of the things that he talked about in this newsletter is he talked about John Wood Jr., who is the national leader of a group called Braver Angels. And this organization, their mission basically is to help people, to teach people on opposite ends of the political divide to converse civilly. So to be able to have civil conversations about politics. So what he actually came up with was 6 tips on how to have these conversations. But the interesting thing about it is that they took these tips from marriage and family therapy. So they're taking stuff from marriage and family therapy and applying it into political conversations. So I thought it'd be interesting. Jim has not seen this yet. So I want to go through it because there's going to be some interesting things that we may agree on, some things that maybe we disagree on, or some things that maybe we think aren't really as relevant. But let's just see how this goes.
I'm excited.
So tip number 1 is a stereotypes exercise. Okay. Where each side will list out the stereotypes that the other side has about them. And then both sides reflect on what kernels of truth may be there. Okay? So as an example, they talk about conservatives will say, we're not all racist folks by and large. That's the stereotype.
Okay.
But there are some racist factions that attach themselves to our party, right? Whereas the people on the left may say something that, we're not wanting the government to run everything, and we're not people to mooch off the state, which is the stereotype. But there are some people who gain the system and take advantage of certain programs, right? So essentially, you're acknowledging the stereotype, but then also acknowledging some kernel of truth. What do you think about that? Do you think that would work?
I am horrified and offended that you said all those things. And I just can't believe that came out of your mouth. The hate mail should be coming in any second. PodTherapyGuys.
I didn't write this.
Nick at PodTherapy.
You're just basically reading Mein Kampf right into the microphone. That's what's happening here. I'm horrified. I hope they get you. Like they got me, Nick. They're coming for you.
I will say, if someone presented me with this, if somebody who had very opposing views from me presented me with like, hey, let's do this, I would be annoyed instantly.
Okay.
What are we doing?
But Jacob's also an outlier. He gets annoyed pretty naturally.
We're going to have what conversation? Do what you want. I'm going to pee.
Okay, well, first of all, we have to start with the foundation that no one is approaching you against your will to have a conversation.
They would be if they wanted me to have this conversation. The only way I would have this conversation is against my will.
There's a lot of stereotypes that libertarian audio guys would like to have conversations against their will. The truth is they do not. All right. So I guess I understand the first part, that we're going to clarify some myths. And okay, it's funny because even as you're saying that, I obviously know that from, systems theory and the idea of marriage and family therapy that, a lot of times the first thing you do is start by acknowledging caricatures and hyperbole that are not probably true so that we can kind of start to remove that from the table. So, okay, I'm with you so far. I like the first point.
Okay. All right. Here's the second point. If talking about politics, frame your statements not as truth statements, but as I statements. Now, this is one that I feel like in the last couple months has changed for me, where I kind of agreed with it before, and now I'm not that I disagree with it, but I think there are some truth statements that have to be made where we can't phrase it as I. So the examples that they're talking about is instead of saying, in my view, President Trump has been, or no, that would be what you do say. Instead of saying it's a fact that Donald Trump has been the best president for our economy, saying something to this perspective of, in my view, President Trump has been good for the economy. So kind of rephrasing it into a personal view as opposed to a fact. So I totally agree with that. The issue that I take with it is there are some things that are facts, right? There are some things that aren't really up for an opinion, right? Like, it's not my opinion that the earth is spherical shaped, right? I think I can say demonstrably that is a fact, and it's not an opinion base. I think as far as the issues with, you can say stuff when we talk about like voter fraud, that in my opinion, there are some things that look fishy or that don't really seem right. I can get that, but I do think there are still facts that are lined up with that.
Yeah. That's where I think this gets tricky. Like, I totally know where he's coming from, because this is absolutely something we do in couples therapy, is we are trying to get people to say, I feel this way about the situation, without making it an absolute, without saying, this is the truth, you're always wrong, you always do this, you mean, harm. So I get it, but I kind of agree with you that, and this I think is, the Better Angels guys, which by the way, there's a Better Angels podcast, I just looked it up, so you can go check that out. I like that they're doing this, and I like what this writer's talking about, but I kind of agree with you that we didn't find ourselves in this difficulty just because we all lost our manners or just because we got emotional. We found ourselves in some of this conflict because there are fundamental assessments of reality that different parties are having. I get called out all the time on the show, by the version of hate mail that I get, which you will soon enjoy yourself, is whenever I talk about somebody criticized me the other day saying, "Oh, Jim's both sides stuff really annoys me." As a therapist, I guess I'm always inclined to try my best to understand the perspective of the other. And so, like, I've talked about that in the past, like, oh, even during the revolution, like, there's all these, like, really noble causes that are ascribed to it. But if we're being fair, how do humans usually make choices? Like, there's a lot of other pieces of this too. Same thing here. I think you're right. Like, there are situations like voter fraud. If you say, I think there's a lot of voter fraud. Okay. And the other person says, I think there isn't a lot of voter fraud. There's an answer out there. There's a quantifiable answer that comes from a reliable source. And so I kind of agree with you that number 2 is good-spirited, but I think very quickly we would see the wheels fall off that car, because almost any conversation I can think of an American liberal and conservative having, I can immediately find the dead end of that road where they can't continue that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm just fascinated by the idea that there are things about Jim that don't bother me, like his both sidesism, that do in fact bother other people. Like the amount of things that bother me about Jim. I mean, it's a long list, and to think that other people have things that aren't even on my list that bother them about Jim.
How long is their list?
That's crazy to me.
That they must have a longer list.
Yeah,
right?
They must have a longer list, because I can't imagine not being bothered by the things about Jim that I am bothered by.
Yeah.
I just like imagining more things on there. Huh, that is
a great demonstration
really
of the I feel statement, Jacob. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good role play.
Thank you.
Tip 3. Sometimes it's best to remain silent, not react, and maintain the peace. That has pretty much been my my go-to tip for the past several years. Yeah. I work very hard on choosing when I'm going to engage in conversation and when I'm not. And I would say most of the time, I choose not to engage in the conversation.
Right.
I just move on, because it's not worth my emotional stress to get involved.
I find it interesting. We're reading a list of how to have conversation with somebody other than you. And one of the recommendations is don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate this list. This list is
Next
terrible.
tip, don't.
I knew it would get a reaction. All right. Tip 4. Paraphrase statements the other side may take in a way that reflects the language the other person might actually use to say it. So this is one that we've talked about actually before on the podcast. This is very common. A lot of people talk about this, is being able to say back to somebody what their argument is in a way they would agree with it.
Yeah. This is the one that I really like. It reminds me of this story, because humans being in different camps on different issues has been around forever, right? And if you look back to like some of the more ancient religions, there's been a big piece of that too, where they have these huge schisms. They have different schools of thought. And my understanding is that there's a really neat example from history in Judaism where rabbis, before they could be heard, like they'd be in this like assembly where they're discussing these theological issues. Before you could criticize your opponent's argument, it was required that you first state their argument in its entirety to the satisfaction of your opponent. to say that to the room first. And if you could demonstrate mastery of their point of view without being slimy, without taking shortcuts, without, any kind of sarcasm or anything like that, only at that point were you welcome to now criticize it and offer a counter argument. And that's a very interesting thing to do. Like in marriage therapy and in couples work, we do a version of exactly what you're talking about here, where can we get to the place where we can say what the other person's actually trying to tell us, whether we agree with it or not. Can we demonstrate understanding of the argument? Like if I tell, I guess to use examples that would parallel what you did in the first point. Let's say the liberal says, or the progressive says, I believe that we should have shared costs for healthcare, and it's a human right. It's something you shouldn't be able to ask whether you can afford. It's something just given to you. The other person should then characterize that the same way it was delivered and say back to the person, okay, I hear you saying that you believe this is a right, that you want it to be universal, that it should always be there. That would be fair. Mm-hmm. What often happens, though, at the kitchen table is the other person says, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. You want communism. And now you've immediately belittled the other person. This is why we're not having a productive conversation. But whenever you try to say, I understand what you're saying, I'm not consenting to it. I have 50 reasons why I disagree. But I get your point without being sarcastic. I can repeat it to your satisfaction. I think that's a really powerful tool in any conversation.
It is.
I think it's huge.
And I can vouch for this that it does work. Because I use this a lot in, not to self-disclose too much, but when Laura and I are having an argument, I use this all the time. And I use it because...
Oh, imagine how painful it must be to have an argument with Nick.
It's bad.
Wow. Just imagine how terrible that would be.
Laura, I understand why you're burning the books. I get it. It's a source of heat, and everything written in them is against the Fuhrer. I understand.
Yeah. Now, for me, it's more about getting to the resolution as fast as possible, because I'm not the one where I don't like to hold on to things very long. Right. If we disagree about something, cool, let's work it out quickly because I got shit I got to do, and then let's move on with the rest of our lives.
Oh, I feel so bad.
Right?
So
for me,
I can't imagine how that would be upsetting to Laura at all.
I don't say that part. But what I do say is I repeat back, okay, so what you're telling me is this. This is the argument you have. And I will do that until she says, yes, exactly. Then I can say, okay, here's my perspective, because it's so much faster. You cut through all the BS about interpretation and about straw manning the other person's position. It just gets there very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great tip.
Tip 5, thumbs up.
That's been my favorite one so far.
That was tip 4. Sorry, there's 2 more left.
God damn it.
Tip 5, share stories pulled from your own experience and community that have impacted your life. So instead of speaking broadly, speak from personal experience, things that you have experienced yourselves, or that somebody very close to you has. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've got thoughts both ways.
I kind of mix feelings. I think it's tricky. So as a general rule, I think it's really hard to listen to ideas in politics, which political ideas are inherently prescriptive. We're saying, I think this gigantic, heterogeneous society with all of its layers and all of its complexity ought to run this way, or ought to, design policy in this way. To then kind of bring that back to an anecdote. Oh, I knew somebody who took advantage of the welfare system. His name was Bob. And Bob, was cashing checks all the time and dealing drugs on the side. And therefore, we shouldn't have this. Okay, that's really problematic for me. So I guess my first reaction to that one is, I don't know how that leads toward a better understanding. But on the other hand, I've found that more often than not, what we don't realize as people is we are very influenced by our personal experiences. We tend to think our conclusions have been drawn based on research and things we've looked into. And if we really drill into it, if we're being honest with ourselves, more often than not, they're really created by our lived experience. So I do think that we're actually getting closer to the truth.
If the only experience you have with someone on welfare is Bob, who is cheating and gaming the system, then you're probably going to be more against welfare than someone who is either on it legitimately or knows people who are just in a rough patch and who are on some kind of welfare program. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, that's just going to happen.
Yeah, falls in the category of anecdotal evidence.
I would suggest, though, that is a fine way to go about having a discussion about it, and a fine way to go about even thinking about ways to rectify it. But you just have to remember that is just one example. So with Bob, who is cheating the welfare system, you might say, well, great. How is Bob cheating the welfare system? And let's fix that.
Yes.
So Bob is doing X, Y, and Z to fool the government into thinking that he qualifies for this welfare system. Great. Let's shore that up. And let's address that. Let's address the problem that I can articulate this problem without saying, because of this, I believe that welfare is a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Don't overinflate the piece of evidence that you do have.
I think this tip is also useful in explaining why you have the position you have, but not useful in explaining why I feel my position is more important or more valuable, or why I'm right. I don't think it's a good technique for why I'm right. I think it's a good technique for here's how I got to this point.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Tip number 6. Be able to identify and reflect on the ways your side may fall short of the standard you hold, or the way your argument may not be 100% spot on.
Oh, yeah. You better be able to explain to me why you're not 100% right as well.
Yes. I use this a lot,
or why your side isn't, perhaps, is a better way of saying that.
Exactly. I use this quite a bit, too, if I ever do get pulled into these conversations. Being able to acknowledge how, or maybe not how, but ways that I could be convinced that I'm wrong, right? To be able to say, like, here's how I think the economy should work, or what government's role in the economy should be. However, I could lose an argument about that. I'm willing to see that I could be wrong, and maybe this way of doing it is better. I'm open to that idea.
If Jesus Christ knocks on my door and we sit down and have a conversation, my opinions about Jesus Christ's existence or non-existence will change.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's important, because it does send the message of open-mindedness to the other person, where we're not just going to continue to fight about this. There is some sort of hope at the end of this that, hey, look, I could be wrong. And I think that's a big thing to admit and say, I could be wrong about all this. But it is up to you to provide some information.
I think there is a simpler way to sum up this entire list.
Okay.
Which I think is stupid.
Okay, go ahead.
And that is, at the end of the conversation, make sure the person that you are having the conversation with wants to have another conversation with you about this topic.
Oh, okay. Okay.
At the end of it, just say, like, great, we're done with this conversation now. Would you like to get together for coffee tomorrow and continue this conversation? And if the answer to that is no, maybe you didn't have the conversation in the way that you wanted to.
That's a good point. Okay. I like that, because essentially what you're doing is, you're identifying the outcome of what you hope. And a good outcome is being able to continue to converse.
Right.
Continue to have the conversation.
Yes.
I think that's a great idea.
I like that.
And how many tips did you need to come up with that?
Almost one.
Almost one.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a full tip.
My list is almost a tip.
Almost a tip.
Just the tip. So
be fucking nice.
just be nice.
Be civil and nice and kind and caring when you have a conversation with someone, and that's it. God damn it, people. What are you doing?
So I actually agree. The last point I could see backfiring sometimes, because I could see if you say, can you tell me why your position might be incomplete, or why you don't think it would fully solve the problem? And the person says, yeah, because it doesn't go far enough. And it's like, oh, okay. So sometimes, like,
okay,
this is not, you admitting that I have some truth in my argument. This is you saying you're not taking it as far as some other people on your side do, and therefore maybe your argument's not the strongest. I don't know. But to Jacob's point, I think that one of the most effective things that I've found in my life whenever I don't socialize very much, but back in the before times, I would occasionally socialize. And when I did, I guess for me, if I was talking to somebody that I discovered had very different views than me, and if I decided that I wanted to have that kind of a conversation, a lot of times I just don't. But if I did want to, I ask myself to just be curious about the other person. And I guess for me, I ask myself before any conversation, what's the purpose of our conversation? Like if I just want to be heard, I could go tweet, right? I could just go blog or tweet or shout into the ether. Who cares? But I have a conversation partner. I'm talking to another human. What do I want out of this experience? And a lot of times when I ask myself that, I think I'd like to be liked by this other person. I'd like to make a better friend with this other person. And there's things they think that I don't know. I'd like to ask them about those things. And I'd like for them to say, I felt heard by Jim, and Jim wasn't, dismissive or mean to me. I like that person. So I guess for me, starting with that position of honest curiosity allows me to sort of ask and just want to know. And that way I don't feel the need to take issue with everything they're saying. But I also understand that at the end of the day, and I think that's where this is a really difficult topic, some of the political issues of the day sometimes are really important and worth fighting over. I mean, if we go back to like the 1800s, the discussion over slavery could not have been gotten through with these 6 points. It needed a war. Like there was only one way this was going to, shake out. Somebody's got to lose, and we're going to decide what's moral, and we're going to decide what kind of country we're going to be. And so it's difficult because I guess I understand that there are situations and topics and issues that inflame such passions that it's really hard to use any of these tips, but that doesn't mean that they're not worth trying.
I'm happy to say that there are important things that have to be discussed and that you have to come around to and you have to figure out. I'm not happy when I see people say things like, well, if you vote for Donald Trump, then I cannot be your friend.
Right.
We cannot socialize if you're voting for Donald Trump because I see that vote as an attack on X, Y, and Z, or a political stance for anything, not even necessarily a candidate. I think that is not a good way to go about that. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I think that's silly or I think that's a ridiculous way to go about it, because there are topics that are going to appeal to you and appeal to your personhood and appeal to things about you that, and I'm using for everyone who just wondered if I used personhood purposely in referring to like LGBTQ matters and things like that. Yes, I did. All of those things are going to apply, and those are big issues that have to be discussed, and those things have to go through. You want to be able to have another conversation when you're done. Mm-hmm. You want to keep on being able to fix things. And so just saying that, well, I have to write you off because of X, Y, or Z. Okay, but that sure seems like a waste. Yeah. Sure seems like you're giving up a lot to just bludgeon someone with a point that is contrary to theirs, that probably isn't going to change anything anyway.
Right. And I would agree with that. Also with the distinction that what you're talking about is different than a situation, because I know this has happened before too, where people cut other people off, not because they have different political views, but because it's just not good for them to continue to engage in that conversation.
That's fine.
Which is that's a different, because that's a different thing than what you're talking about.
No. If I say to Nick right now, I don't want to talk about this anymore,
and I keep doing it,
that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I say, please, can we stop having this conversation? Can we talk about anything else? That's not the same thing. Right. But that's also kind of that it's the other direction. It's like, well, now I don't want to ever do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that point.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Jacob just said that I think becomes the 8th tip on this list of 6, because I think we've discovered extra things, but I think it's equally important. Do not franchise the individual. And what I mean by that is that's something we've seen a lot of. People say, if you're voting for Donald Trump, you must be okay with every decision he's ever made, every policy position he's ever taken, and every accusation ever been hurled at him. You're okay with that. You are now enfranchised into everything he is as an individual. You must represent everything. And I think that's really, really difficult. I understand that there's global ramifications of one candidate ruling all, and I understand that at the end of the day, it's a binary choice. People have to pick one side or the other or whatever, but I just don't think it's intellectually honest whenever you say that about anything. You know, it's like, oh, you are a Democrat. Bernie Sanders is a Democrat or caucuses with them. Therefore, you are Bernie Sanders and you're everything he's ever said. This is everything you're okay with. You must be socialist. You must be X, Y, and Z. You're franchising the individual into some bigger, brander thing that inherently doesn't let that person speak for themselves anymore. Like, ask them what their thoughts are. They may believe in 5% of that platform, but that's enough for them to go with it. You got to be really careful not to just, like, whatever it is, overextend and overgeneralize everything about the person.
So there you go. I'm glad I brought that up.
Yep.
What a great
10
A-block,
tips
Nick.
on a list of 6. I liked it. It was a good A-block. And I can't wait for all the emails we're going to get about how Nick characterized all of you. I wouldn't stand for it if I were you. I would write in.
No.
So,
Thank you, Jim.
PodTherapyGuys at gmail.com. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about how to break up. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Crazy Manana Scoop, Malaya, and Dan Martin. Thank you guys very much for supporting the show. And if you would like to become a show sponsor, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up to become a Theraproducer. Our trivia question, our trivia theme... Close. No, not exactly. Our theme for this week's trivia is Billboard Top 100.
All right.
Okay. This song was the first a cappella song to appear on the Billboard Top 100.
Oh.
If you would like to join the Theraproducers and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
The first part of Fat Bottom Girls.
Yeah, only
that
the
first little
part.
that first little part. Not many people know that first part of the song actually charted.
It was that made 100, and then 101 was the rest of the song.
Yeah, it was the rest of Fat Bottom Girls.
Yeah.
Right. No.
I actually have a sincere guess on this. I think it's Auld Lang Syne.
Okay. No.
Okay.
Was that a cappella?
I think
B,
it is.
on the Billboard Top 100. Okay, no, you're wrong.
Just no.
No.
I can't think of any popular a cappella song.
80s.
Okay.
Kind of has a
Bohemian Rhapsody
reggae feel to it.
Now I've just got Jim guessing Queen songs.
The video featured
Lean on Me.
Nope. Featured oh my god. Robin Williams
What?
Oh,
was in the music video.
for an a cappella song?
Yep.
A cappella reggae
I have
song?
no idea.
Yep.
Is it No Woman, No Cry? Oh God, I got it. I got it. Don't worry. Be happy.
That's it. Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy. Yes.
Because
Nailed
Didn't
it.
you just say it's been sung by many a
not
fish on a wall?
instruments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no instruments. Everything was his voice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
So there we go. Bobby McFerrin.
Wow.
All right.
All right. Auld
Fair
Lang
enough.
Syne was close.
Moving on.
I feel like I was in the...
I have things that I'd like to discuss about that. And here's how I would like to discuss them.
All right, next letter is How to Break Up. Hey, y'all, I've loved listening to your podcast. I've probably listened to 12 hours of it and the past 2 days. Wow, geez.
Sorry.
You definitely consult your physician, writer. It's not healthy. Thank you for the awesome content. I wanted to ask you guys a question about breakups. I've never been broken up with, and I have never broken up with somebody else. I love traveling, moving around, and doing long trips, which has been a perfect excuse for breaking up with a few people. At least 10 relationships of mine have ended because of my travel and trips. I'm now entering the time of my life where I want to start my career and settle into one spot for a while. I often find myself in relationships that I genuinely enjoy. enjoy with people who I like. However, I haven't met anyone who feels compatible with me for a long-term partnership. I've noticed a pattern of wanting to end my relationships around 5 to 8 months in. What's the best way to break up with someone without the convenient excuse of travel? I hate hurting people and ending things on bad terms. The couple times that I've tried, they feel like I've done something wrong and people kind of get upset. In reality, I really like the other person, but often don't feel like we have the best compatibility. I'm too scared to hurt my partners, but don't want to string them along. Thanks, Anonymous.
Okay, this is a good question that I'm surprised we don't get more often, because I think it's pretty common. And I'm willing to bet that all of three of us are going to have the exact same response to it.
Okay.
Which is that. So I'll go first, and you tell me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong. That was easy.
Oh, hold on. Let me get started.
Sorry.
It's like pulling off a Band-Aid. You just have to do it. The fear of hurting somebody, you're going to have to work through that, because you're going to hurt people. There's no way to do this that isn't going to cause some sort of emotional reaction, unless they just happen to feel the same way you do, and it's kind of a mutual thing. But people are going to get hurt. That's kind of, unfortunately, that's the way that it goes in dating and relationships. I don't think there's anything that you can do to soften the blow for somebody else. I think the best thing to do is just to be completely honest. What you told us is what I would say to them. That you like the person, but you just don't feel like you have the best compatibility. I think that's the best.
You're just not in like with them.
Yeah, you're just not in like with them. There's a big difference between liking and being in like.
All of my questions have to do with you've never broken up with someone, nor have you ever been broken up with.
No.
That's 100% of my questions revolve around that statement.
Well, I think what the listener's saying is they've never had to do it without the convenient excuse of I'm moving or I'm going away.
Okay.
I think that's what they were getting at, is that's the thing that they've always done that has always been their way of moving on. And I get this. Like,
okay.
I know some people that I don't know how they do it. Like, that's just kind of their job, but they travel constantly.
Right.
Like, they're just always on the go. And I'm guessing that's probably where that's coming from.
Yeah. So,
okay.
You're not answering his question, though. His question was how. So you're saying you do need to do it, and you're saying pull off the Band-Aid. Okay, that's fine.
I don't think...
But how should somebody do that?
Okay. I don't think there's so much of a how. I think you just have to do it. I think what I said there, as far as you just have to say what you just said to us, I think that's the how. I don't think there's any other way of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
That's fair. So I guess what I would add to that,
what's your advice, Jim?
So I guess I would throw in there, if you have to do unpleasant news, if you have to quit at a job or you have to break up with somebody, we've had a question in the past about how to quit a job. We've talked about not burning bridges. We've talked about, not taking a victory lap. We've talked about not, putting a finger in their eye. You've already made the decision, right? So I guess that's where the tone of the letter, I think, lends itself to the exact language I would want the writer to use. I'd want them to say, I've really enjoyed our time together. I don't know that I'm a long-term relationship kind of person, and I don't know that I see this continuing indefinitely. Even though I like us, and even though I like what we're doing right now, I do think we should probably discuss, whether or not we want to continue this. And I guess that is, kind of this direct way, but I guess probably not direct enough.
That's what you just said to me. I don't feel is direct enough, because you kind of, what you did there is in an attempt to soften it, you kind of left the door open, because you said, maybe we need to have a conversation about where we go from here. Maybe we need to talk about, I think that sends the message that, hey, there's still a chance. Maybe we can do that, but you don't want to do that. I think the best thing to do is be 100% honest, because if you're not, if you're trying to save their emotions and you try to make it really soft and gentle, you're making it worse for them in the long run, because then instead of moving on, they think, oh, I need to try harder. I need to do something different so I can change so that then they'll like me. I think you just have to, this isn't working. I don't see us compatible.
All right. Let me ask you this, though. What would your opinion be on if they asked you why? So you say, listen, I just don't think we're compatible. I don't think it's working out. I think very highly of you, but I just don't think that we're going to be able to continue. I'm sorry. I like you, but we're going to break up. If they were then to say, okay, well, hey, thanks for telling me. Could you tell me why? Could you give me some feedback and give me some notes? Tell me why this didn't work out. What about me didn't work for you? Would you feel comfortable answering that question, or do you think that's a trap?
I don't necessarily think it's a trap. If I had answers for that, I would answer it. I would be honest. I mean, again, without being intentionally hurtful. Like that's kind of the difference. Like I don't have intent to hurt somebody. So I don't want to be mean about it. But if there was something that, I enjoy hanging out with you, we have a good relationship, but it doesn't feel like an emotional relationship. It's more of just a friendly relationship. If that's how you feel, then that's what you say. That's how I would approach that. Now, if
it's like, I just don't want to be in a relationship, I want to fuck a lot of people,
then that's what you
say.
That?
Yeah. It really doesn't have to be them at all. It can just be you.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not you. It's me. I want to fuck a lot of other people.
Right.
Okay.
If that's
I'd like you to continue being one of them if you're down. If you're in, I'm in to keep this train rolling.
This feels like a conversation you've had before.
You know, and it always ends well. It always ends well.
He's reading from his text messages.
Yep.
I love that directness. Well, there you go, Ryder. There's some good suggestions of different ways you could do it, but I do think that we're all in agreement. Be direct.
Here's the thing.
Still down to bone.
Here's the thing. At the end of the day, to the writer, at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to doing some internal work and really being able to become comfortable with conflict. Because I know for me, that was the hardest thing. When I was dating and I broke up with people, that was really, really hard to do. Because I'm the type of person, if I go to a restaurant and I get food and it comes out cold, I don't say anything. I'm just like, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. No, I'm not going to send it back. Nope, I'm not going to complain. Everything's perfectly fine. I don't like conflict. So for me to break up with somebody, that was something I had to learn very quickly. That I had to, if I want to move on with my life, and if I want what's best for them and for them to move on with their life, it has to be quick, like a Band-Aid. It's got to be direct. It has to be honest. You can't drag them along. But you have to get that thought out of your head, that thought of, I can do this without hurting them.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen. And you don't have to become comfortable hurting people, but you have to become comfortable.
Although that helps.
It does help. You have to become comfortable with discomfort.
Comfortable is even a strong word. You have to be okay with it. Or you have to be understanding that discomfort is going to get... Sure. It's going to be there.
Yeah. That's fine, too.
Yeah. You have to be accepting of it at the very least.
Accepting of it. Yeah.
Again, though, being happy to cause discomfort is a plus in that scenario. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, but then I think we got some other things we need to talk about.
Oh, like what? I can't think of anything.
Jacob the Heartbreaker.
I'm just sitting over here thinking about the times that I've broken up with people and the times that I've been broken up with, and just how, like, none of them were pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's never fun. But to be a fly on the wall of Jacob's breakup course would be fantastic. It's not that I don't like you. It's that I really want to date your sister. And I just think she's better than you. And so
I also really like other people.
Oh, what a heartbreaker. So good letter there, writer. We like it. And be direct, and express yourself kind of how you did to us. But, there's no easy way to do it. You don't have to go out of your way to put salt in people's eyes unless, you feel like it. But there's also a way to do it and just kind of get through it, give people the permission to heal. You can't not hurt people. You're just going to have to, let it be. But good letter. All right, we're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we're talking about journaling and burnout. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
That's right. We're breaking up with this segment.
Fast and quick. Today's episode is brought to you by Robert Brownie Jr., Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Crazy Manana Scoop, Malaya, Dan Martin. Thank you very much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And if you would like to become a show sponsor and become a Theraproducer, go to patreon.com/therapy. Our second question of the day, in honor of our Theraproducers, is which artist/group has the most top 100 hits? And I'll give you choices.
Okay.
Is it A, the Beatles, B, Elvis Presley, C, Elton John, or D, Aretha Franklin? If you'd like to join the Theraproducers and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
All right. So this is top 100.
Top 100.
The most top 100
top 100
hits.
Okay, so the most songs in the top 100, Beatles, Elvis, Elton, or Aretha.
Correct.
It's got to be Beatles. There's no question. It's Beatles. Final answer. No doubt in my mind. Not a shred.
I'm gonna say not Aretha Franklin.
That's because you're a racist. But continue.
I'm gonna say not Elton John. Although Aretha has just a ton of stuff. I don't know. I'm gonna guess Elvis.
Okay.
I'm gonna guess Elvis, and here's the math I'm doing.
Okay.
Is the Beatles had a ton of they had a ton of music on the charts. All four of those people did. Elvis had less competition when he was in his prime than some of those other artists had.
Oh.
So I'm gonna guess Elvis.
Okay. And you are correct.
All right.
Elvis
No.
Presley. Yes.
Are you kidding me? It's not the Beatles?
I don't know if you've heard of this, Jim. They call him the king of rock and roll. Those hips don't lie.
I mean, even if you think about the fact that he died, and the Beatles, their catalog is huge. They were making songs way longer than Elvis Presley's whole career. Like they just have the years on their side.
Do you have the numbers?
Yeah, I do. Okay.
I bet it's not close.
You are also correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so Elvis Presley.
Elvis had a ton of hits, dude.
Elvis Presley had 108.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, second place, is James Brown with 89.
Okay.
Okay. Then it goes Aretha Franklin, 73.
Oh, there you go.
Wow.
Ray Charles, 73. The Beatles, 72.
Wow.
Elton John, 67. And then Stevie Wonder, Rolling Stones, Marvin Gaye, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, and then Dionne Warwick.
There you go.
Jeez.
People forget about Dionne Warwick. Mm-hmm. Dionne Warwick was a hit machine for a while.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, Elvis, any song that Elvis released was just immediately on there. And you got to remember those movies, too.
Yes, the movies, yep.
It's like what I think Jim is forgetting about is, I mean, there were hit movies in there.
That's true.
With Elvis Presley. They weren't good movies, but they were producing hits. Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
Songs
the dude
for
was
all
an
of those
entertainment
movies.
Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. The songs that go with the movies too. Yeah, can't believe the Beatles let me down. Whatever. All right,
I mean,
journaling
the Beatles,
and
I knew the Beatles were the wrong answer as soon as you said the Beatles for sure, 100%. And it was like, oh, this is
no doubt.
Yeah, this is sitcom writing here. Where whenever Jim says something, you know it's not true.
Oh, see, now that was a 1 in 4 chance of just guessing it. That was an excellent opportunity for us to bet.
Yeah, damn it.
yeah,
we should have bet on that.
Yep.
I let the record show I have been right a lot of the time in the trivia game. My confidence is well warranted. Okay, my instincts are rarely wrong, and I still think that I want to recount on the damn Beatles.
I need you to define the word rarely.
Feels like a lie.
Yeah, that's.
It's a generous interpretation of
I
time.
appreciate your point. I need you to define that word.
All right, I'm going to read this letter. Journaling
Because I would bet
and
you're less
burnout.
than 50%.
Yeah.
Hey, Pod Therapy friends. I want to continue to express my gratitude for your podcast and answering my previous questions. Counseling has been going great, and I credit your podcast with encouraging me to get the help when I did. As someone who identifies as a guy, there is often a stigma around getting help as a guy, and how guys are supposed to handle their stuff, and how seeking help could be a sign of weakness. This podcast is a ray of light for me because it's 3 guys. Oh, he says, because it's 2 male therapists and 1 male life coach talking about mental health. Very cool. Mm-hmm. My counselor has been taking me through a self-esteem journal of her own creation, and I have really enjoyed it. She has recommended that I journal outside of our sessions for my own well-being. I did this for a while, but I got burnt out really fast. It felt more like a chore to do rather than something I wanted to do, so I stopped. The way I journaled was writing about what happened during the day or week and how I dealt with it and my feelings around the events. I then tried to write down a couple of things I am grateful for to help keep it as a positive outlook on life. I am wondering how folks do journaling. I hear about bullet journaling, gratitude journaling, free journaling. I really want to do this, but I don't want to get burnt out on doing it. Do you have any advice or guidance on journaling? Or could you just talk more in depth about journaling in general? Sincerely, University Jeff.
Have you tried looking at this from your journal's point of view? I think before you get into this, you need to be able to describe the argument that your journal would make. And try to go at it from that angle.
Okay. Now, Jacob, despite Jacob's sarcasm here, actually has a point. Actually has a point. Believe it or not, you're onto something without even knowing.
How are you going to bail him out of this?
Okay. Here's how I think.
And then how am I going to claim credit for it anyway?
Here's how I think that's relevant and how it can tie in a little bit. Here's what I would do. I think what's useful is learning from the journal itself. And what I mean by that is going back, rereading some of the stuff that you've already written, and then asking yourself, what am I missing, or what would I have liked to known more about this time that I actually wrote it? What questions am I left with reading this journal? Because then I think what'll happen is it will start triggering things, maybe some different areas that you want to focus on while journaling. Because I think that's when burnout happens, is when you're doing something just because you're told to do it and not because you're getting anything out of it. So whatever your focus is on journaling right now, you're not getting anything out of it because you're getting tired of doing it. It's a chore to do it. But I think if you start asking some of those questions, just being genuinely inquisitive by reading the journal and wanting to know more about certain things, then I think that's going to help you identify a target of what you're going to be journaling. That's my thought.
I don't know how Jacob said that, but okay.
That's what I said, Jim.
That's where he was going.
Listen.
Open your ears, Jim.
So
when I'm being condescending to Jim from now on, I'm going to start calling him Jimmy.
That's fine.
You should.
Yeah.
Just throw that in there. So I do want to comment on why journaling comes up. Because I think a lot of people, if they've never been to therapy, they sometimes, and by the way, University Jeff, thank you for saying all those nice stuff about getting therapy for yourself. We're always so glad to hear people do that and giving us some credit for it. And yeah, I mean, it feels really nice to hear somebody kind of acknowledge, what you did, that there is a lot of stigma, I think, as men, and there is something different about listening to 3 guys who do talk about it very openly, and hopefully that's inspiring, and I'm glad it did for you. That's wonderful. But a lot of people are scared to get into therapy because they kind of assume all the therapist is going to do is listen to me complain and then tell me to journal, and journaling is cliche, or they think it's childish, or it's like something, girls do when they're teenagers, something like that. Here's why journaling really matters. What we, the therapist, are trying to get a person to do in journaling is we're trying to draw their attention to the delicate interrelationship between the world around them, their personal feelings, and then their behaviors, right? We're trying to get them to start an inner dialogue that's developing insight. In some cases, we're trying to get them to language their emotions because that metabolizes emotions. You'd be surprised how often emotions just kind of fester and sit in the back of your head. You're not even aware that they're influencing your decisions and the way you're behaving toward other people, but whenever you language them, whenever you metabolize them, it kind of digests them and breaks them down, and they kind of start to leave, and then the person starts to behave differently and ultimately live differently. So journaling is primarily about that action and facilitating that action. Secondarily, I think it goes back to what Nick said. It's valuable because it creates a historical document where you are studying yourself. And whenever you go back and you reread, oh my gosh, this is, a time in my life whenever I was going through this or that or the other thing. Look at how scared I was. That's what I do with my journal. So I journal in a variety of ways. I have a notebook that I write in with a pen, and then I also audio journal with my phone or, whatever. I'll just kind of turn on record and I'll record that. And sometimes for me, verbal recording is more natural. I can do it while I'm driving. And it's good. Like that's just a way that Jim digests his emotions better, because sometimes writing for me is a little bit too slow and I don't get the full effect of it. But I really like the writing ones because I'll go back and my eyes can just kind of skim a chapter of my history, and I'll see how scared I was about something or how sad I was about something, or how confused I was about my future and uncertain. And it's interesting from this future vantage point to look back at that and realize, you know what, I was going to be okay. And if I could get in a time machine and talk to that dude, I'd reassure him and let him know, Jim, it turned out okay, buddy. It all's okay. And that's really helpful, because now in my truth, in my present, if I get triggered, if I get overwhelmed, I sometimes remember that. And I sometimes remember, one day future Jim is going to look back on this journal entry and he's going to remember how it all turned out okay. And that, I think, for me, gives me a sense of continuity in my own story and gives me a sense of, understanding overall, which improves my coping skills. So just a couple of thoughts on how I journal, what I think the purpose of journaling is, and some of the takeaways of why I think journaling is helpful. It's not just some cliche random exercise we tell people to do. It's, something that we actually think has meaning.
Well, I occasionally journal, and I'm bad at it in that I don't do it often enough. I need to get better at doing it more often. But I for one, like writing it. I like to write. I don't like doing the. I don't even like doing dictation, like a computer dictation or anything. I like actually sitting down, and I'm saying writing. I mean typing, writing, right. all of that in the same category here. I like that because it forces me to then be thoughtful. And more thoughtful than I would be if I'm just talking, because as we all know, I can just sit and talk without thinking for a very long time.
Yep.
And but if I have to write it down, if I'm having to type it, or if I'm writing it longhand, I have to keep thoughts in my head for a longer period of time while I'm putting them to paper, while I'm putting them into the computer, and I think that has value to it.
Yeah, we used to do that. I mean, pretty much. A lot of the writing assignments that we would do in drug and alcohol treatment, we would have a lot of people that would say, well, can't I just record this on my phone and then share it that way? And we would say, no, we want you to write it. We actually want you to sit down, hand write it out for that specific reason, because it forces you to slow it down, forces you to have to process it. And then reading it then afterwards, you process it again.
There have been, there's a specific instance that comes to mind, and that was when an uncle passed away. And he was, at the time that he died, he was the oldest male in the family. This is my dad's older brother. And, he was the oldest male on that side of the family, in that family block of, those uncles and aunts and cousins and people like that. And sitting down and writing about it really helped me realize some thoughts that I had about it. And just taking that time and sitting down and doing it was really valuable to me in, this is how he led the family in ways that he led the family by being the oldest surviving member of the family. And here's ways that his father had done that before, and after his father died, ways that his mother had done that, and that was really neat. It was a neat way to sit down and digest that, and I wouldn't have done that just by dictating a journal entry of like, well, my uncle died, and he was dealing with this illness and everything, and then that happened.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a really powerful tool to be able to understand why we feel something, because there's always a reason behind why we feel something, but we never language it, we don't process it, we don't look into it until you actually have to write it down, and then it forces you to really kind of look into it. And it's all about developing insight, like learning more about yourself. I mean, ultimately, another thing, I mean, we all kind of gave our take on this, but I think the correct answer to this question at the end of the day comes down to, you need to talk to your therapist about this. Go back to the person who assigned it to you. Let them know how you're feeling about it, and get whatever take that they have. If they want you to, because they may just say, okay, stop doing it. They may have some other technique that they want to do instead. We're giving you our take based off what we think would be helpful, but at the end of the day, always go back to the person who gave you that assignment and ask for clarification. Let them know how you're struggling with it, and what, ask where you can go from there.
And make sure to explain to your therapist why what we said is better than what they said.
Yes,
please.
Very important.
Yes.
Yeah. They're
what
not
is
the
said on a
181st
podcast
best therapist.
ultimately. Yeah, it ultimately. Now this is from the 181st best therapist in Las Vegas, so you know it's good.
Yeah,
but it's unclear
quality.
what ranking the life coach has.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure how to convert the ranking system into other regions and localities. Hey, last point. If anybody out there is new to journaling and you're like, yeah, I've never done this before. Do I want to try it? But you're feeling a little intimidated to just look at the blank page and like not know where to start. There's guided journals. The writer kind of mentioned that, said, yeah, my therapist created one. And so that's an example of a guided journal. And writer, it may be the case that a guided journal might not be for you, but for a lot of folks, a guided journal is a great way to get started. And it's usually a book that you can buy, and it will have questions in it, sometimes weekly reflection questions, daily reflection questions that can kind of stimulate some thinking in you. And that can sometimes be a writing prompt that can help you kind of identify areas that you want to do some thinking about and get a little bit more out of journaling. So if you've never done it before, guided journaling usually is what you type in, or guided journals, and those are pretty helpful.
There you go. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, and thanks for all the support, man. And University Jeff has had a very interesting ongoing story. We're rooting for you, Jeff. I know you've been cooped up there in the dorms for a long time, and hopefully, we've been helpful. And I'm glad to hear that you're working on things, because I know you were kind of in some tough spots with all the pressure that was happening. So really glad to hear you're feeling better, man. And good for you for taking that step forward. So we are at the end of the show. We want to take a moment to point toward our store. If you'd like to go grab yourself some Pod Therapy merch, you can find it at our website.
Bait and tackle.
Bait and tackle. Yeah, podtherapy.net is where you can locate the gift shop, and you can find all the fun swag that is now associated with our show. Thanks to everybody who's been buying stuff and has been posting pictures on social media and tagging us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. It's so cool. I mean, Nick and I were just talking about that before the show. We were chatting on the phone yesterday, and we're both just like, it's very surreal, to know that there are humans wearing this thing that identifies this project that we've been a part of,
right?
And kind of what it symbolizes. It's just being pro mental health and sort of not taking yourself too seriously and just, loving other people, man. So it's just rad. So thank you, everybody that's supporting us. Podtherapy.net, you can grab stuff at the store. And then if you go to patreon.com/therapy, you can access all of our exclusive Patreon content, stuff that you'll find on patreon.com/therapy. You will find extended cuts of all of our episodes, where we usually do a little pre-show that's just a little bit more casual, not as structured. You'll also find side projects we've done. Speaking of journaling, there are several entries in patreon.com/therapy that are just titled Jim's Journal, where I have done audio journaling and submitted it to the Patreon to share, my thoughts with other people about life stuff that was happening. And it's interesting because we're approaching the anniversary of the last journal I wrote, or it didn't write, but recorded, which had to do with the suicide of one of my patients and how that affected me as a therapist. And it was very emotional. But I was glad to get to role model what it is to be a human being going through a difficult thing. And I think that worked for a lot of people to kind of inspire them to think about journaling too. So you can find things like that. You can also find the extra projects that Nick and I are putting together. We're working on a recording through a therapy movie kind of project. And so you kind of hear our jibber jabber and commentary about a movie that, has to do with therapy or psychology. And we're putting together a mini-series of interviews with interesting mental health-related guests all over the world, which is going to include a therapist from London that we interviewed who was just wonderful. It's including a mental health influencer and person who's developed a brand that supports mental health. We're interviewing a hypnotherapist. We're interviewing a chief financial officer from a hospital to learn more about finance and healthcare. So there's going to be some really interesting deep dives. You can find those as well as they are released at patreon.com/therapy. So just a little bit of a deeper plug for what we do over there behind the scenes. But we do want to take a second to thank our bosses, the Saccharin 16, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of the fan club. Oh, before we do, if you've become a patron since January 17th, whether that's a Therapal, Therapod, Therodactyl, or Theraproducer, you're not hearing us thank you right now because we're recording in the past. So we will catch you on the next episode. We always do. By the way, if you do sub to the show on Patreon, go to our Twitter because we will always thank you on our Twitter account at PodTherapyGuys the day that you subscribe to us on Patreon at any level. And then we will also thank you on the show when we record next. But thank you to our bosses, those who give at the Theraproducer level. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Elio Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Scott Jameson, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Dan Martin, Reverend Scoop Kevin, Malaya, and Scott Brady.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening the episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link we provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Bang-a-rang, Rufio.
Boy, if only there was some kind of list that could tell us how to have a conversation about that show that we just did.
I know.
That'd be so nice.
I'll put one together.
Good.
Hopefully with an even number of points and several of them being the same point.
We'll do a show next time about doing shows.